Hey, hi everyone. So again with another video, with another presentation. Sorry, the another presentation is the topic is storytelling with data. In this case, we want to see how we can use the data available to us to tell an insightful story, or a story that can assist maybe the marketers, maybe the stakeholders, maybe the CEOs make the right decisions based on the facts or based on the data analysis, such kind of thing. So in school, we learn maybe languages or the mathematics, but when it comes to languages, it is very easy because in this case we are just putting words together. But when it comes to mathematics, no one is there to teach us how to tell story using numbers in this case. So that's why I decided to come up with this topic, storytelling with data. So let me scroll to the next slide. I see what is all about this storytelling with data. So we are going to consider two subheadings. Number one is understand, number two is choose. So when it comes to understand, what I'm trying to really explain here is about understanding the context. In this case, you have to understand the context first and then choose. So choose an appropriate visual display. In this case, just try to simplify it as choosing the right chart to use in this case, to present your data or your information in this case. So understand and choose. So you have to understand the context and then you choose the appropriate visual. So next slide is about the importance of context now, because this is the first topic or subheadings. Understanding the context in this case. So creating a data visualization, attention at the time should be paid to understand the context for the need to communicate. So try to mean that before even you start your data analysis, or even before you start your exploratory analysis, you need to understand maybe your problem, the problem you want to solve. For example, we want to solve problem related to customer retention. So you have to understand maybe what is this customer retention, how will it be of great impact to our company or to our organization, such kind of point to take into account. Some strategies to help you set you for success when it comes to communicating visually with the data. So when you understand the context, now it will be easier for you to know what to communicate to your audience in this case, because after understanding the context, from there you move to what we call data analysis, and then in data analysis you can decide maybe the main things or the main point that you are going to emphasize most, or you are going to consider to be most important, and those are the points you are going to communicate or to tell story about to your CEO or even to a manager. The next slide is about now an example, or to differentiate between exploratory and explanatory analysis. So about exploratory analysis is what you do to understand the data and figure out what might be noteworthy or interesting to highlight to the others. So in simple terms, when it comes to exploratory analysis, is when you are doing all those processes of like importing the data to a certain maybe tool you are using, analyzing, creating charts, creating maybe scatter plots or bar charts, maybe trying to figure out what is the relationship between certain variables. In this case, we are doing what we call exploratory analysis. So now, after this exploratory analysis, the main goal of this is just to identify what is happening in the data, or what are maybe things that you have managed to discover from the data, or what are the patterns you have managed to discover from the data itself. So in this case, now we go to explanatory analysis from the word explain. You just want to give just the few, or to communicate our analysis to our audience. So you just be pointing the key points in this case. You don't, so your audience are not supposed to see, like, maybe they're not supposed to see, but no one is expecting to see what you have done, the kind of analysis, or those maybe you have used Python. No one want to know even if the level of maybe the knowledge you have in Python. But what will be of great importance is how you will be maybe uh, pointing out your points, like you'll be explaining your point, in this case how you'll be communicating. For example, they just want to see what they can do or what can be done to increase the customer retention. From the latter example that I gave, for example, if it is customer retention things that you are dealing with, so the stakeholder or your manager want to just to understand what can be done to improve our retention rate, just that, nothing else. So he is not, or she's not interested in those code things that you have done in exploratory analysis. They just want to see this explanatory part, like this, if we do this we can improve our retention rate to a certain level. So now that is just the difference between exploratory and explanatory analysis. So now, to consider or to understand the context, you have to consider these three terms. Number one is who, what, and how. So whom, or we start with whom. So to who is like, to whom are you communicating? So you have to understand the person you'll be convey your information to. So it is important to have a good understanding of your audience is and how to perceive you. For example, will I be communicating to CEOs? Will I be communicating to stakeholders? Will I be communicating to my manager? Will I be communicating to students? Will I be communicating to maybe to students, such kind of things? So then what? So in this case, what do you want your audience to know or do? So what do you want your audience to know or to understand? So you should be clear how you want your audience to act, and consider how you will communicate to them, and the overall tone that you want to set for your communication. Because in this case you have understood like who you would be communicating to. In this case you can set your tone, and then it is only after these two, like you have identified like who and what, you can move to how you are going to call, how you are going to use maybe your data to help your audience maybe understand what is happening, or to help your audience maybe know what to do next. So the first thing you have to consider who and what, and then you move to the third point where we are going to consider how you are going to use the data that you have or the resources that you have to make your communication effective. Yep. The next slide is just more explanation of who. So the more specific you can be about who your audience is, the better position you will be in for successful communication. This case is just like the better you are or you understand who you are going to communicate to, it will be easier for you to know what to communicate and even what to say, and also even to prepare before even the little communication or the little presentation time. Then identify the decision maker is one way for narrowing your audience. Also identifying the decision makers it's also another way that can help you improve or become more efficient when it comes to communication. Then the more you know about your audience, the better positioned you are to understand how to resonate with them and form a communication that will make their needs and the yours to be met in this case. So this is just the explanation of who, and then after that I'm done with understanding the context now. So the first thing, you have to understand the context, meaning you have to understand what you'll be doing, you have to understand your audience, you have also to understand maybe what your audience want to know or can do, and then from there you can decide how you are going to do it for betterment of your audience, such kind of things. Then the second part was about choosing an effective visual, in this case choosing the right chart for a certain a presentation of information. I'll start with the first one. Is just a simple text. So when you have to just a number, when you have just a number or 2 or 3 numbers to share, simple text can be a great way to do this. So the first thing, like the chart, it's not a like in this case it's not a must use all the other type of chart, like bar chart, tables, scatter plots, pie charts, histograms. So you can just represent your data using just a simple text. And I want us to see this example. So think about us already using the numbers, making it as prominent as possible, and a few supporting words can clearly make your point in this case, because the goal is to enable or to enhance like the people you are trying to communicate to get your point or understand maybe what you are trying to say. So I have a simple example here about a simple text. So simple text is one of the effective visual that you can use to present or to communicate your ideas. So I have A and B, option A and B. So in option A, children with a traditional stay-at-home mother, like the percentage with married stay-at-home mother with working husband. So 41, 1970, 20, 2012. So that is A. Let's go to B. So 20% of children had a traditional stay-at-home mom in 2012 compared to 41% in 1970. So just by looking at these two examples, I'm able to choose the one that I can understand very fast, which is B, because for A, I'm not even getting it very fast. But for B, where I have used a simple text as compared to Bashat, for example, a simple text where I say 20% of children had a traditional stay-at-home mom in 2012 compared to 41% in 1970. So that's why I'm saying, like, it is good to be in a position to decide the type of maybe chat or visual to use depending on the problem you're trying to deliver or to solve in this case. So using a simple text can be very critical, very important on this case example that I've given. So number 2 is tables. So tables interact with our verbal system, which means that we can read them, because I think everyone is aware of a table. Like, this is something that we were introduced to when we were young, and now, like, at this age also, we can be able to understand it very fast, because this case will just be comparing rows and columns. So let me go to the example here. So before I go to the example, I want to combine tables and heat map in this case, and I want to see the difference. So when it comes to heat maps, is one approach for mixing the details you can include in a table, while also making use of visual cues in via a heat map. Like, a heat map is just introducing color saturation in this case. So from in your table, you introduce color saturation, those cues, and then in this case, it will make maybe your information to be easier, maybe even to detect what is happening. For example, you have a table and a heat map in this case. So you have categories and ABC, which are the columns. So in this case, if I ask you in table A and heat map, which is the largest value in table A, in the table in this case, it's very hard for you to identify very fast. Let's go to heat map. What is the highest value in this case? I can see 58 and 55. So I'm able to detect this very fast because we have used what you call the color saturation in this case. So heat map will be more efficient as compared to tables, but also it depends with the audience you'll be presenting, or maybe the information you want your audience to see. Number 3, we have a scatter plot. Scatter plot is mostly used to show, like, the relationship between two variables. So sorry. So they allow you to encode data simultaneously on horizontal axis and vertical y-axis to see whether and what relationship exists in this case. For example, in this case, we have a very simple example where we want to see the relationship between the miles driven per month and the cost per mile in this case. So what we can see is that as the cost per mile is higher than average, because we can see in this case, you can see the average is around $1.5. So we can see that the cost per mile is higher than average when less than about, for example, it's higher when less than about maybe 1800 miles. 1800 miles is where we have the cost per mile being higher. So, and then when we get higher than that 300 miles, the cost per miles goes higher again. So this is maybe what I'm able to interpret from this kind of data that is given, or this type of relationship. So that was just an example. Maybe you can also try to figure it and try to understand it differently, or like maybe you have different understanding of it, but that's what I can understand, because I can see that the cost per mile is higher than average when less than 1700 or less than 1800, or we can say it is higher when more than 300 per miles. Yep, That's what I could say. We are talking of the second one is lines. So line graphs are most used to plot continuous data in this case. So because the points are physically connected via the line, it implies a connection between the points that may not make sense for categorical data. So in this case, line graph mostly, as you can see from the example, we have a passport control waiting time, because in this case we're using dates and the waiting time. So we say is mostly used for continuous data, where continuous data was the waiting time, which is visually represented on the y-axis. We are using dates, and on the date or time, or what we're calling the month, and the y-axis we're using the waiting time. In this case, which is a continuous numbers or continuous data. The next one is bars. So bars mostly are used to represent categorical data types in this case. So sometimes bar charts are avoided because they are common. This is another point to note. So sometimes people avoid using bar charts because they are common, and this is the time that people should use bar charts, because if they are common, many people can understand what is happening in the bar chart. So it is one of the favorite type of chart that we are supposed to use when you are doing your presentation, or you are choosing the effective visual to use to present your data. So bar chart is one of the appropriate one to choose. So we also have the type of bar chart and the one to choose. We have too thin. You don't choose like represent your data using too thin bars. Too thick bars also not good. Just use the normal thing that people can be able to understand very well. So this was just an explanation. So this is a mistake rather, but a bar chart should be leveraged because they are common, as this means less of the learning curve for your audience. So your audience, they will not be needed to be trained on how maybe to understand bar chart, because they have the knowledge about it. Then the stroke graph, this is another one. So useful when you have two time periods or point of comparison. For example, you want to compare the performance of your employees for two certain years, 2020 and 2023, or 2021 and 2022. Stroke graph would be of great importance in this case. For example, I just want to pick, for example, career development in 2014, it was 49%, but career development in 2015, it dropped to 33%. It almost dropped with around 6%, not 6 or not even 6. It almost dropped by 15%. So in this case, so there are things that can be or 60%. So there are things that can be done maybe to improve the career development in the coming year, maybe 2016. Also, we can see the culture improve from 80 to 96%. So there are some of the things that we can be able to detect very fast using the stroke graph. The next one is vertical bar charts. So vertical bar charts, like the line graph, vertical bar charts can be single, two series, or multiple. So in this case, I know maybe if you are good in data, you can be able to, you have come across this one, because we say bar chart mostly when working with categorical data types. So you can see cat 1, cat 2, this one, and then you have two series where you have combined A and B, and also multiple series where you're using A, B, C, D, and then the cat series. So this is a vertical bar chart. We have a stacked bar chart. In this case, you can see the stacked bar charts. They are more limited. This one, they are more limited. They are meant to allow you to compare total across categories and to see the subcomponent pieces within a given category. So it is hard to compare the subcomponents across the various categories. So when it comes to stacked vertical bar chart, it becomes very hard for you to compare what is happening. So it's not one of the preferred type of chart. So we have a waterfall also in this case. In this case, we also consider a waterfall chart can be used to pull apart the piece of stacked bar chart to focus on one at a time, or to show the starting point or increase or decrease and resulting endpoint. So maybe in this case you want to see what has been happening, for example, in our human resource department, for example, in the beginning of the year and the end of the year, as we can see from this example. So 2014 headcount month. So at the beginning of 2014, we had 100 employees in this case. So maybe after 1 month, we hired 30 more employees, that is 130, and then other 8 employees came to our company. Maybe they were transferred from our what we call our branches. Now we have 138. Then at maybe August, we have transfer out, 12 transferred out. So 12 transferred out, and the 10 exits. So 22 are transferred out. So 138 minus 22, it becomes something like 116. So at the end of 2014, December 2014, the total component of employee remaining is 116. So that's how we can compare this easily using what we call a waterfall chart. The other one is chart to be avoided. Not all chart you can use in this case. Number one, you should avoid using pie chart because pie charts are evil in this case, meaning it's very hard for you to identify what is happening in pie chart unless you use labels to present maybe it, or to show maybe what is in the data. For example, a pie chart shows a marketer shares across 4 suppliers. We have A, B, C, and D. These are suppliers. So if asked to make a simple observation, which supplier is the largest based on the visual, what do you say? In this case, is supplier A or supplier B the largest in this case? I know most of you would say B or A, but I don't know for my case. Let me go to the next slide to see why the pie charts are evil. So most people will agree that B suppliers, lettered in the medium blue at the bottom right, appears to be the largest. So if you had to estimate the proportion suppliers B makeups of the overall market, what percent might you estimate in this case? So perhaps you can tell by reading questioning that something fishy is going around there. So look at what happened when you add numbers to the pie chart segment. So in this case, if we add numbers, it now becomes easier for you to really represent your data, because you can see that 4% is for A, but most of you would have said B. That's why I say it's not good to consider pie chart in your case. In this case, if you could have used a bar chart, it would be easier for you to know what is happening very easy, and then also you can sort. But when it comes to pie charts, it becomes very hard in case you are working with so many category of maybe variables or data. So donut chart also you should avoid that, because in this case we're trying to compare the arcs of an angle, of which is very hard for you also to estimate the correct thing. So never use 3D unless you are maybe you are given, maybe you are told to use 3D pie charts. Just avoid them. It's also very hard for you to identify what is happening, or even to estimate the real point, or to make or not even to understand what is happening, but to identify what is the correct figure, or to estimate the right thing. So also avoid using secondary y-axis. Generally not good at all. For example, in this case you can see we have on the x-axis we have the years or the date. On the y-axis we have two y-axis, secondary y-axis, revenue and for sales of employee. In this case, this is very hard for you to identify which one is revenue and which one is for sales of employee. Just avoid using secondary axis. Rather, you should do like the thing that you are supposed to use is this one now. So you're supposed to use what we call alternative way, where we have labeled directory. For example, you see we have used labels instead of, or what we call the axis. We just consider using labels instead of using the axis. Or alternatively, you can pull those axes onto the one side, because in this case you can see you managed to compare the number of employee salaries at the top and the revenue growth at the bottom. So these are the options that you should maybe prefer to use instead of using the secondary y-axis. And that is the end of my presentation. I know you have gained something from my presentation. In case of a comment, you can leave them, and you also remember to subscribe to these channels, and also we'll be sharing more content related to this. Yep, thank you.